Thank you, Don. Hello, everybody. I'm an addict. My name is Bud. They asked me to speak on willingness, and I wasn't real sure. I kind of figured I'd end up with a workshop this weekend, but I didn't know what it was going to be on. And I was asked, which one you doing? I said, I don't care. He goes, I'll put you down for this one. I said, okay. But willingness, let's just jump right into meat and potatoes of this damn program. The willingness. Willingness is what got me in trouble. Because I was willing to try about anything. The hard thing I had with willingness when I first got in recovery was change. I wasn't really willing to change. I wanted to, but I didn't have an open mind. And willingness without open-mindedness and without all these other spiritual principles just gets you no damn place. I was thinking this morning, looking at the moon up over the lake early this morning, and I was thinking about that old story, that if you got 3 frogs sitting on a log and one of them makes a decision to jump, how many frogs are left? Well, there's still 3 frogs sitting on that log because ain't nobody done shit yet. And I got thinking about that, and I put myself in the frog's place, me with a couple other addict frogs sitting on a log bitching about it being so damn dry, but the water's right there, but we're not willing to do a damn thing about it. Well, there might be a fish in there. I don't care. So I had to learn to become willing. I came in this program through a hospitals and institutions meeting. It was kind of ironic. Dawn introduced me this morning because Dawn was one of the people on that committee that was at my very first meeting. And for the first 6 months, I had to go. They told me I had to go. I had to go to that damn meeting once a week. I'm like, fine, I'll go to your damn meeting once a week. And I started hearing these people's stories and how they was this and how they did that and how they got a little better. And then something happened. A friend of mine died, and it was the last true friend I had left. So I became a little bit willing to try something. So I went and surrendered. I said, let me see if these people are full of shit or not. So I became willing. And I started talking to some people, and they said, you need to be a little open-minded too. Because my sponsor says that, a mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. So if I don't keep that open mind with a little willingness, nothing's ever going to happen. And when I work this program, whether I have somebody I'm sponsoring or just somebody I'm trying to help out in the program, I have to look at their willingness. And the literature tells me that any addict who walks into rooms at Narcotics Anonymous, even a using addict, shows a degree of willingness that cannot be discounted. Now, as long as they're open-minded, I have no problem working with them. And I had somebody I was working with one time, and he says, why do you keep sticking on to me? Why are you willing to work with me so much, even when I keep screwing up? And he asked me this about 3 times. I went in the bedroom and got my pre-sentence investigation. Threw it down on there. I said, you got a half hour to read through that? I said, that's why I'm sticking with you. I said, because someone was willing to stick with me through all that bullshit. I wasn't one of them guys that was that damn smart that I went into I got arrested the first time and said, oh God, my life is over. I'm going to get all clean and shit. No, I'd sit in jail and scheme my next run. I had time to plan it out. I knew where, when, how, and who. So I had to take some of this willingness I had. In the past, I was willing to rob my mom. I was willing to sleep with my best friend's sister or his wife. It didn't matter. I had willingness. I had to learn to turn these things, and that's, to me, that's the way this program is to change. You have to be willing to change and to do these things, to turn things around. I went through so many strange things that I had to be willing to listen to advice, People would give me a suggestion, I wouldn't do it. I was willing to ask for a suggestion. Hey, how did you do it? And they tell me how they're staying clean, how they're getting better. But then I wouldn't have the willingness to follow through with it. Well, that seems like too hard. Why do I want to give up my old friends? I'm used to doing this. This is what I do. My whole life, hey, I'm a construction worker. I'm supposed to sit in a bar after work. That's normal. That's what we do. I wasn't willing to change. Well, how do I get new friends if I cut all these people off? And then I had to be willing to listen to people say, Well, you know what? There's three kinds of people you deal with in active addiction, and those that use you, those that you use, and those you use with. And I got to thinking about that and say, yeah, that's come I got more friends when I'm working overtime jobs and got more money. Why do I got more friends when this is happening and that's happening? You know, where are my friends when I need a ride someplace? You know, truck breaks down, where are they all at? Oh, I can't get there today. I'm a little busy. You know, I come into rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. My truck broke down. It's 3 degrees below zero. I call an addict because I know he was off work. And I said, what are you doing this morning? And he goes, well, I'm just sitting on the couch going to watch a movie. I said, man, my truck broke down. You think you can come help me? And he showed the willingness. Get up, get dressed, and come get my ass at 3 in the morning, or 3 degrees below zero. 8 o'clock in the morning when, hell, my dumb ass would have stayed on the couch. You know? So, you know, I don't know a whole lot about how to explain willingness. Everyone that came down here this weekend showed some willingness. Everyone that walked in that door showed willingness. You know, and it's not just the people that were willing to get up when the bell rang to go stand in line to get breakfast. Because most of us were. You know, we have willingness to learn a little bit. You know, we'll show a willingness to learn something. Give me some information I can use that I can take. We'll see if we got the willingness to apply it. You know, I was joking with somebody. I carried my book up here, and I don't know why, because I'm not one of those guys that you'll ever hear spout the book verbatim, because those guys drive me nuts. You know, we've all seen those, the guys that can spout chapters out of the book verbatim, but you see them on the street and they don't apply a goddamn thing out of it. You know, and it just, you know, makes you want to beat them to death with the book, but that's wrong. That's violates some spiritual principle. I think it's in there somewhere. But, you know, I look in willingness here, and in just the basic text, it's listed 51 times. I started looking through that. You know, that damn thing's in just about every step. I got to be willing to do something in this program. And the just for today is 5, and the how and why is 12. You know, so obviously it's a pretty important topic because they keep talking about it. You know, but I have to be willing to do a few things. You know, I had a gentleman last week. He relapsed and called me, and he was feeling real bad about himself. And I said, well, why didn't you call me sooner? He says, I don't want to feel needy. I said, well, you called to get some dope, didn't you? I said, why didn't you call me? I said, you willing to take a suggestion? He goes, yeah, I think I am. I said, do you remember your old dope dealer's numbers? He goes, yeah. I said, what's the prefix? He told me what the prefix is. I said, get on your phone list and find a few recovering addicts that's got the same prefix and dial them daily by hand. That way, if you go to make that call one more time, you might screw up and get someone in recovery. You never know. Because I've had people call me and want a 20. They say, yeah, I need a 20. I'm like, 20 what? He says, yeah, you know what, 20. I said, do you even know who you're talking to? He goes, no. I said, this is Buddy. He goes, oh, fuck. Ruin that. So, you know, sometimes, you know, best laid plans work to save your ass. You know? I have to be willing to do a little service, you know. But I told this gentleman, I said, you know, with you being a little, having too much pride to call and want to sound willing, or I mean sound needy, losing it, you take away my willingness to help you. I said, it says in the book we can only keep what we have by giving it away, so you're being self-centered and not affording me that right to give you what I have, so therefore I'm going to lose it, so you're jeopardizing both of us. He said, I never thought of it like that. I said, you got to be willing to do these little things, even if it feels uncomfortable. You know, I don't feel real comfortable coming up here and speaking in front of a bunch of people. Although, you know, you see me outside, I'll ramble to you for an hour or two. You know, it might not go anywhere, but I'll just ramble to you. If I can hold you hostage, by golly, I'll do it. That's what I did in the past. I still do it today. So, you know, a little willingness don't hurt. You know, excuse me. One of the guys that was at that first meeting also, and he's here, he got me involved in service. And that showed me a new way of willingness. And sometimes it's a little overboard, you know, but anytime somebody asks me to help, I'm there to do it. Hey, can you do this? Yeah. Can you do that? Yeah. You know, I carry an area position. I carry like 4 group positions. Through hospitals and institutions. Some of the institutions we actually take a 7 tradition. So I'm responsible as treasurer on there. So, I'm willing to do service, you know, and I'm willing to pick up, let's go into that service real quick because there's a big willingness thing right there. I had a lady in a program up in South Bend, and she was worried because she don't want to do this service where she's got a group position, an area position. And I said, yeah, but you're willing to put your name on that phone list. And I said, you're willing to answer that damn phone at 3 in the morning. You're willing to take this new lady that comes in the program, has lived her life in chaos, and take her to your house and show her a clean house with a nice yard and a family that talks to each other instead of screaming at each other. There ain't a bunch of havoc going on, and everything's calm. You sit down at a normal time and eat dinner instead of a pack of crackers you might have had sitting in a cupboard because something in your mind said you must put some food in me sometime. That's willingness, and that's service, no matter what people say. If you're new, when you go to a meeting and they're moving tables and chairs, show a little willingness. Help them. You go up there and help them. And you'll get to talking to them. And you might just start out rambling, you're babbling bullshit. And the next thing you know, you got a network started. You got a foundation going. Be willing to do those things. You hear people talking about going to coffee after a meeting and you think this is that super clique over here. These are all the clean time people over here. Look at them. That's their clique. Well, if you're new, take them hostage. Hijack their ass. Hey, where are you going? 'Cause I'm going too. And that's how it works. And they are usually more than willing to drag you along. People think that we come to these things and it's all recovery. It's super recovery, super recovery. That's all you're doing. You're talking about recovery. Sat at the campfire last night. You should have heard some of the damn jokes. I had to go back and write some of them down. I'm going to use them again. It's the willingness to live your life a different way and to make things just a little bit better. I'm willing today to understand that I don't need to get better all at once. I'm not going to lay my head down at night, ask my higher power to make me better, and when I wake up in the morning be Captain N.A., super saved individual. Just by the time I end the day, I want to be a little bit better. And I'm willing to deal with that. In the basic text, it says at the end of the introduction, I know what the 5th tradition says, our primary purpose is to carry the message that addict still suffers. That's on the group level. That's on the fellowship level. My primary purpose as an individual is to stay clean just for today and then to carry the message of recovery. I'm willing to live my life a little different on the street so all these people that knew me before, that knew I was likely to walk past them on the street and hit them with a beer bottle and see what they got in their pocket. That poor bastard that stands out in front of 7-Eleven trying to hustle change all day. I was never willing to do that. I would never stoop that low. But let him go around the corner, take a leak, I'll rob his ass. I was willing to do that because I didn't have to deal with all the people. But I see those guys today on the street. And I'm walking a little taller, a little straighter. I'm not hiding from people. Now when I hear someone call my name, I don't look for a rock or a stick or the first alley I could duck in to hide because this son of a bitch I probably owe him something. It might be somebody that wants to ask me a question. And I'm willing to answer it. I'm willing to talk to the addict that comes into a meeting who might be still loaded and want to know how I got through that first day. How do you do it? How do you stay clean this long? I don't know. I wasn't worried about this long. I'm worried about, catch me in 10 minutes, I'll tell you how I did it then. So I might have to break it down to 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's all written in the book. And as I said earlier, I cannot spout the book verbatim. I'll try and use it sometimes and I have it all screwed up, And it's like, but I know what it says. You know, and to me that's important. Be willing to read between the lines. If you don't understand something, ask somebody. Go to some of these meetings that have literature discussions and you listen to 5 or 6 or 10 people who've read the literature a little bit. Or even, because, you know, you go to a literature meeting, you read the damn literature, and then you talk about what you've seen. Some of what I've figured out has come from somebody with 2 or 3 days clean. I was 14 months clean and I was willing to go over and answer a question for a newcomer when he called me away from the door of a bar because somebody had said something about a girl I once dated and seen her back out on the street. And I said, fuck it, it ain't worth it no more. And I was just going to go and end it right there. You know, hell, I'll change my clean date. No problem. But this newcomer asked me a question. So I walked over to his car and said, hey, what do you need? And by being willing to do that, by him being willing to ask me a question with 3 days clean, who I had just given a white key tag to that night, he saved my ass from a relapse. You know, I've heard newcomers come into a meeting and say something that made so damn much sense that my sponsor with 20 years clean wrote it in his book. I'm like, damn. Some of these people know some shit. They don't know it, but they know something. You know? They talk a lot about, you know, our 11th step is about prayer and meditation. You hear these people talk about you need to pray more, you need to pray more, you need to pray more. Well, all of us, well, me, I know when I was using, I prayed my ass off. Oh, God, let me get this truck home. Don't let that be a cop behind me. I know they're following me. God, is that a cop parked in front of my house again? I ain't even been there yet. What? They're just beating the punch. They're saving the phone call. Might as well meet me there. You know, but I learned to do a few things a little bit different. You know, having a little willingness to change some things. Look at life in a different story. You know, I go through things. We had a little thing going on where people were talking about a slip versus a relapse. And I'm trying to figure out what a slip and a relapse is. And it's January and I'm building a parking garage up in South Bend and I'm walking down, it's lunchtime and I'm walking down the ramp and I hit an icy spot and my higher power showed me what the hell a slip was. Damn. I had a choice right there, save my face or my ass. I didn't save my ass very well on that one. I got a bruise on it. But you know, you have to be willing when you say when you do your praying, be willing to do the meditation. Look for the answers. You know, it's not going to be like it is on Monty Python where the clouds part and his trumpet's blaring and his big talking head pops out there and starts telling you shit. It's going to be a little more subtle usually. And you have to be willing to look for those signs. And if you see something you're not sure of, be willing to call somebody. Say, do you think that could be? And a lot of times it is. You know, I get a lot of my information off TV because my higher power knows that's where my dumb ass is going to be, plopped in front of that damn TV. So you might as well give me my shit right there. You know, MASH. I've watched every episode of MASH 100 damn times, and I'll be thinking about something, and I'm thinking about it, and all of a sudden they'll say something I've seen it 100 damn times, but all of a sudden, boom, it made sense now. Yeah, maybe that's right. You know, I was thinking about unmanageability. I'm standing on the job, and I'm leaning up against a handrail at break time one time, and I watched this leaf blown across the job site. And I said, that son of a bitch got no idea where he's going. I said, that was me. And then it crashed into something and stopped for a little bit. I said, yeah, that's when I went to jail. And then a little swirl of wind blew it away. I said, yeah, it got released. Rolls around again. Crashes into something else. And I watched that leaf for 10 minutes. Blow around, roll around, crash into something else. And then get free and go do it all again. I said, that's unmanageability. I was that little leaf at one time. But you got to be willing to stop and look at these things. You know, look at the thing, you know, when you're looking at the beauty of something around you that you notice now because you're not all polluted, you know. It's amazing. Listen to people that are fairly new in recovery talk about a sunrise or a rainbow. They've always been there. Just never noticed them. I was 3 months clean. I'm walking to a meeting one day and I'm looking at this beautiful cloud bank coming at me. Most beautiful thing, sun behind it and everything, and it's all kinds of pretty colors. And I'm looking at that, and then all of a sudden I get about a block from where the meeting was, and I remembered. I said, I've seen a cloud like that before. And I got soaked. But it didn't dawn on me till too late. I was still a block and a half when the rain started. And I stood there looking at it because that cloud was still beautiful. You know, being willing to see these things today. Being willing to just live, you know. I went through so many years in my life where I merely existed, and I used to go around bitching about people who were occupying space on the earth and using up air that could be better suited for someone else. And I got to thinking about that. I said, what the hell was I doing all those years? You know, I was just using up someone else's air. Someone who could have been using it more than me may have died from that. You know, you have to be, you know, I become willing to try and find good things and bad things. You know, just over a month ago, I went back to work on the 22nd of April after being off for nearly 6 months. The 23rd of April, I celebrated 3 years. I got home from that meeting that night. My sister calls me on the phone. My family only call me in emergencies. She goes, are you sitting down? I said, Dad died, didn't he? She goes, yeah, they found him this morning. So I had to search in my soul and figure out, you know, when days passed, I'd have all this bad shit happen, and I might be able to find a good thing in it. But at least now I have 2 good things happen, and then something bad. I call my sponsor at 10:30 at night. He knows something's wrong when I call him that late because I know he's in bed by then. And he says, what's wrong? And I told him. He says, well, call me tomorrow. I called one of my sponsees. With about 6 months clean, I called him and told him. He says, what do you want me to do about it? I said, just call and check on me. You see, I'm willing to ask for help today. You know, I had 2 sponsees, my sponsor, and a whole bunch of people with a whole lot of clean time, and several people who kind of look at me like this big, tough construction worker guy who shows no damn emotion. Hell, when my mom died 5 years ago, I couldn't even cry. You know, I had no emotion left. You know, those of you that watch Deadliest Catch on TV, when I seen the thing on the TV that Captain Phil died, I'm looking him up on the internet and tears are rolling down my face. I never met this man. I seen him on TV. Why am I crying for him when I couldn't cry for my mom? Because I was willing to do a few things and I got a few emotions back. You know, I got a substance abuse counselor I had in community corrections, and one of his things, he's got over 30 years in the program, and he said, I'm going to tell you something straight up, early recovery sucks. And I had to think about that. And that's because you started getting these damn emotions that you ain't had, that you buried for all these damn years, and they're starting to come out. And it shows a willingness to learn to deal with them without covering them. And that's something that can't be discounted. So if you're new, or even if you're not new, if you're running through an emotion, call somebody. Let somebody know. And even if they don't have an answer, they probably know someone who does. Be willing to reach out. Because as I said earlier, our literature states we can only keep what we have by giving it away. So for God's sakes, give us the opportunity to keep what we have. Give us a chance. Be willing to make that phone call. Just say hi. Hey, you think we can get together, have a cup of coffee? Hey, I just need to talk for a minute. I'm feeling weird right now, and I don't know what it's about. Maybe talking to somebody for 5 minutes might just bring them out of it. That's all it takes, is a little willingness. You know, don't lay there and the phone rings and say, I'm not sleeping right now. You know, if you put your name on a phone list, if you're willing to put your name on a phone list and your number, be willing to take that call. You know, you call me my greeting on my voicemail is, I'm either at work or in a meeting. I'll call you as soon as I can. And I tell people, if it's an emergency, call me again. When I get the same call 2 or 3 times, I'm going to answer it. I let my boss know I'm in recovery and this could happen. And he'll afford me a few minutes to talk to somebody to keep someone else from dying. You know, that's my primary purpose, is to keep myself alive one more day. And by doing so, I might show somebody else that they can too. But you just got to be willing to grab it. You know, recovery's there for everybody. You just have to be willing to take it, you know, and grab it. Because if it was easy, everyone would be recovering. But it's not that easy. It's simple, but it's not that easy. And the thing is, so many people are not willing to change. And I have to change. I have to change every day. I have to remain open-minded. I have to evolve. You know, I've said this, and I upset somebody one time saying this. I said, but if it wasn't for evolution, we'd all be hanging from trees still. But we had to evolve. I had to be willing to accept a higher power. One that I wasn't sure about. I knew there was something there. My daily meditation for my clean date is something about my first higher power was basically whatever force keeps me clean. That's what it was. I used the St. Joe River in South Bend at first. It was loving, caring, greater than myself. Take life, give life. It was there. I could see it, smell it, touch it, pee in it if I didn't want it to. But I had to evolve it. You know, my higher power, I don't have to go to a special building. I don't have to light some special candles. I just need to ask him a question. I just need to ask him for help. I need to ask him to help me one more day. Show me some sort of sign, and then be willing to accept that sign, accept the answer I'm given. You know, I'm not one of those guys who'll call 17 people to try and get my answer. You know, I got a sponsor who's not afraid if, you know, I had a guy call me and said, your sponsor said he thought I was full of shit. What do you think he means by that? He means you're full of shit. Okay? He don't mince words. He don't have time for that. You know, he's going to tell you straight up. You know, my grand sponsor got 30 years. He ain't afraid to lay into me either. Which is kind of scary. Because a funny story about that, when I looked for a new sponsor, I had both of these gentlemen in mind. But the one guy was about this big and about that round too at that time. And the other guy is like, so I went for the intimidating guy. Because I need someone who might be able to put me in my place. I get talking to my new sponsor 2 years ago, and I'm talking to him, and I find out his sponsor was this other guy. I'm willing to deal with that. I can have them both. You know. But you don't see me asking 17 people the same question, trying to get the answer I want. Because if I'm just going to do that, why am I bothering asking a bunch of damn questions? Just to feel better about myself, just to prove a point to somebody? I don't need to do that today. I'm willing to accept me for who I am. I'm willing to accept every one of you for who you are. You know, if you don't get it the first time, keep coming back. You know, it's still here. We're always going to be here. You know, I do a lot of hospitals and institutions work, and there's a willingness all by itself there. Because when you go into a lot of these facilities, whether it be correctional facilities, I do a correctional facility in Mishawaka, Indiana for the youth. And it's kind of disheartening when I sit back and think about it, that knowing that when each of these kids hits 21 years old, no matter how good they're doing, I'm probably going to lose every one of them. Every one of them's probably going to go back out. But luckily I was born in the country. I worked a lot of farms when I was a kid, and I'm back to farming. Because all I can do is plant a seed and have a little hope that maybe it'll grow. And even if they go back out, they're going to know we was there. They're going to want to look for us. They're going to get online and type in NA, and all this stuff's going to come up, and they're going to say, maybe I can find a meeting. And then all I can do for that individual is be there when they come back and say, I remember you when you did a meeting at youth campus. And that's all I can do. That's all any of us can do, is be willing to be there. And if all that person might need is a hug, might just need a shoulder to cry on. But by having a willingness to be there and do that, I had an individual call me at 3 a.m. one time, said, I need to talk to somebody. And I'm like, and all I got out of my mouth in this whole 45-minute conversation was, hello? I got up out of bed, turned the coffee on, I'm getting around, pouring me a cup of coffee. I'm ready to lay out this grand and glorious spiel of bullshit to him of how his life can get better. And he said, thanks, you helped a lot, and hung up the phone. And I'm like, damn. What's up with that? You know? So here I am up at, 4 in the morning. Usually wouldn't get up here. I'm thinking I'm going to have to go get this guy and we're going to talk. And I'm already thinking of who I can call to go with me on the 12 step, because they say you're not supposed to do that alone. And we're going to go save this soul. And all I had to do was answer the damn phone. If I'd have known that, I'd have went back to sleep. I'd have just left the phone sitting there. It would have saved me a lot of hassle. But just show a little willingness. If someone needs a shoulder to cry on, you probably got a dry shirt someplace. It'll dry. Tears are good for you anyways. So just show a little willingness. Answer that phone. Talk to a newcomer. Talk to an old timer if they're hurting. Because the fifth tradition, I don't care how many times I've read it, I have yet to find a clean time requirement for that still suffering addict. It could be anybody in this room. If you're at a meeting and you're having a hard time and you're sharing, because we've all heard these people, they come into meeting after meeting, talk about how they're in a bad place and how life is sucking right now and what they're doing and da-da-da. And the question I want to ask them is, are you still clean? And if they say yes, I said, how in the hell did you do that? Because I might be going through that shit today. Be willing to share that too. I want to hear your joy and your misery. Be willing to share good and bad. Be willing to listen. Be willing to give back a little bit of what was given to you. That's all I got. Thanks for listening.
We have one more sponsor or speaker, Shannon.
Give them hell, girlfriend.
Hi, family. Shannon Attic. Bud already covered everything, so I'm straight. Let's see, willingness. I got willingness as I came up here. I'm scared to death. Think I've talked one time in 18 years. I don't do stage fright very well. Got my basic text. My it works how and why, just so I can stay focused. It says here on page 10, it says, our experience shows that it is necessary for us to be willing to do anything it takes to obtain this precious gift of recovery. And when I first got here, they told me if they told me to stand my head in the corner, if I was willing to do that, then I had a desire to stay clean. And considering when I got here I was doing other things and willing to do that, standing on my head in the corner wasn't that difficult. I got pregnant 20 years later. My first daughter's 21, my second one's 19 months. And everybody assumes I'm the grandmother, but that's okay. I'm so young looking. They told me that she had a heart defect and some difficulties, and she had Down syndrome, and she had a list of things she could have, and was I willing to carry it full term? And I didn't question that. I didn't even want to know what she had or what she could have, because I was willing to do whatever. Whatever God blessed me with, that's what I got to deal with. And the doctor asked me 3 times. I don't believe in abortions, but I've had them over the years due to recovery and my lifestyle, and wasn't willing to do that again. Because just like when you relapse and you have a guilty conscience, I had a guilty conscience doing some stuff, That was my birth control back in the day. Not that I didn't get pregnant only twice in my life. So I'm willing to go to any length to take care of her. And her dad's not in recovery. He's out there using. And he was in treatment recently. He had 5 months clean. And I was willing, he hasn't seen her since she was 4 months old, since her second heart surgery. And I was willing to drive all the way to get to Oakland, California to let him see her. And We got back Wednesday night. Barely. Had the police called. His family was trying to take Carly from us and have us jumped and killed or whatever the hell they wanted to do. And Oakland, California is not very nice. I don't like being in a facility, in a place where I don't know anybody and there's too much violence going around and their people were everywhere. And so when the police are looking at you like you're here a little bit too long, you need to get out of here as soon as possible. So we went to the airport like 7 hours early to sit there just so I could be safe. And so I'm not willing to go to California anymore. If he wants to see his daughter, he can bring his butt here. Anyway, so I had a bad week and happy to be in a safe place. And once I hit Camp Max ground, it's like serenity around here. We all go through stuff during the year and come back here and cleanse ourselves. You know, there was a newcomer here yesterday that was crying. I'm like, you'll be crying all weekend. That's what we do. It's cleansing, you know. I mean, there's people that's got, 20, 30 years clean, and they'll come down here and dump our shit. And it's like a family, you know. We see each other. My daughter, when I first started coming here, was like 6. She's 21. And, we watch everybody grow up and their kids, and we honestly care about what happens to each other. Says here, we become open to change. Last week when, this week when all this controversy is going on, the old me, I would have fought his mom. We would have been just having it out. We would have been in jail. I don't want that chaos today. I guess that part I've evolved from. I was telling Maria and some other people, when I first got clean, I would come to meetings just to piss people off. They didn't want me to be here. I'm going to be here to instigate shit. I'm going to, we used to put bets on people how long they're going to stay clean. They're miserable. They need to just go out and use. Old timers just give us money to go out and use, just to get away from them. And I'm not that person today. But I did put bets on people. And the ones I betted, I wish they'd go out and use because they were so miserable and making my life miserable. They stuck and stayed. And the ones that I just knew had it, they're gone. Some of them have died. Some of them disappeared. Like he talked about, the ones that talk really good, they're not here. I've seen more people die in recovery than I've seen out on the streets. And I don't want to be one of the statistics. I know we're all going to die, but I'd rather die clean. And in my opinion, God blessed me with Carly because I had relapsed in September and I got pregnant in February. And my first daughter, I was using with her. So it's a blessing that she came out. I used to joke. I'm like, shit, I was getting high all the time with Ashley and she came out fine. I'm clean with Carly and she comes out with issues. But God only gives us as much as we can handle. And she's happy most of the time. And as miserable and as bitter as I've been all my life, it's a blessing. So, I ain't passed out, so I guess I'm okay up here. There's one thing in here. In step 8, actually. It says, some of our willingness will come about simply by writing our amends list. And I ain't there yet, but I've made some amends. Where is it at? There's one part. The changes brought about by the power are evidenced by our changing our attitudes and our actions. And I guess I've evolved from the person I used to be. It's like a slow process. You look up and you're different. So I just pray I'm around long enough for her because I don't want her to be in that other chaotic family. When someone's talking down to you and you're a piece of shit and you're everything, that's how I ended up where I'm at here. I mean, my mom and my family did that shit to me, and I don't want to be that person. and I don't want that around her. And that other family is so negative and so violent that, you know, Downs kids are happy anyway, you know, luckily. And if they're around that environment, I don't care how happy you are, you're going to become negative. So, and lo and behold, I hope she never does drugs, because they tolerate drugs like water. And I'm surprised we haven't seen nobody with Down syndrome in recovery because they can, you know, it just goes through their system. They burn it. And I learned that through all this stuff. I think I know more than her nurses now. So, I don't know. I'm just happy to be here. And I had the willingness to get up here and not pass out. And I don't know. I love y'all. Thanks.
Okay. Before we open the floor for sharing, I need to remind everyone that you are being taped. If you wish not to be taped, let me know so that the tape can be turned off. Does anybody not want to be taped? Okay, the floor is open for discussion.
I'm Matt. I'm an addict. My God, this is my first convention. Last night, as soon as I got on the grounds, I just felt the energy. And my God, it was electric. I'm running on 3 hours of sleep, everybody. I am literally running on 3 hours of sleep. That is how electric the energy is. And I'm meeting a lot of new people. My network, oh my God, is growing bigger and bigger and bigger by the minute and by the day. And I just want to say that last Monday, I had a relapse. And I wanted to come to We Grow with Love ever since I heard about it. And I wanted it so bad that I could taste it. And last Thursday, I got the call from somebody in my network that said, "You just won the drawing for We Grow with Love." My response was, "Don't bullshit me. You know how much I want this. Don't effing bullshit me." And he's like, "I'm not bullshitting you. I wouldn't do that." And I got off the phone, and just 4 hours prior, I had called my aunt in Dearborn, Michigan. And I had to tell her that I had relapsed. She was pulling for me. I've got family that I hardly even know that's pulling for me, that wants me to get better. But I relapsed, and I had to tell her. 4.5 hours later, I'm on the phone with her saying, "You know what? I'm going to Milford, Indiana to an NA convention. I'm going to be around 2,000-3,000 people who are crazy, fucked up motherfuckers just like me." And you know what? First minute I walked into that meeting, I'm so damn glad I did, because it showed me honesty. I hate the word. But I have to be willing to change. I've got to change myself. I have to change the people that I'm with. I have to change the places where I'm at and the things I do. One thing that Rena B said, she was the main speaker the closing speaker at ISNAC. She said, "I was a lying, cheating whore coming into recovery, and I'm going to stay a lying, cheating whore." And today, that's what I am. I was a lying, cheating whore coming into recovery, and I'm going to stay that way. But you know what? I'm only honest with myself and God. I didn't sign a pledge. I didn't make a promise to anybody to be honest with anybody else. Just me. And that's where I'm at today. And it's been an emotional roller coaster ever since. Give yourselves permission today to cry An addict said last night, look in the mirror. Right there's a miracle. Because each and every one of you are here for a reason. Because you want to change. You have the willingness to change. And that is a really, really big step. My willingness to change only comes from the 3.5 years that I was in my addiction, where I didn't want to change. Matt knew how to manipulate, and get, and do what Matt wanted to do. But now I'm living for myself. Just a couple of weeks ago, I think it was about a month ago, I was sitting outside smoking a cigarette, talking to my dad. And he's like, I hear a bird singing. I'm like, yeah, I'm sitting outside smoking cigarettes. First time I've noticed how beautiful God's creation is. Because when I was active in my addiction, I didn't care. All I cared about was getting my next hit of dope. But now, I'm not just addicted to drugs. I'm addicted to cigarettes. I'm addicted to life. And I'm addicted to NA. And I'm going to keep coming back, and I'm going to keep staying right where I'm at because I'm happy. Thank you for letting me share.
My name is Casey. I'm an addict. Bear with me because I have a little bit of a cough thing going on, so if I hack up along, it's okay. I don't know, me getting up here in front of a room full of strangers who I don't know anybody in here except for maybe like 2-3 faces, because I'm from out of town, there's willingness right there. I don't know, willingness for me was really hard to come by because I'm as stubborn as you can possibly be, even still, you know. But I was willing to try something different. And I'm glad I did. You know, and I'm still willing to try something different. And I'm still, it's hard to say that you're willing and have, for me, it was hard to say I'm willing to do this and to do that and do this and then have people believe me. I had to show them I was willing. You know, I had to show myself that I was willing to do the things I said I was going to do, because for a very long time, oh, I'm going to go do that next week. 4 years later, I still hadn't done it, you know. For me, you know, the first step for willingness was to take suggestions I had been given and to actually follow through with them. You know, that's when I realized I had become willing to be able to walk into a room full of addicts and be completely honest with them was willingness for me, because I would never have done it before. You know, I don't know. And it came in time, and I hate the word time, I really do. You know, it all happens in time, you know. This too shall pass, give it some time, it'll go away. I hate that word, but that's what it took. It took a lot of time for me to become willing to do the things that I needed to do to stay clean. It took a lot of time to be honest and say and tell somebody, hey, I'm not willing to go do that. And when they ask why, I just don't want to. You know, for me it took time, and I'm glad that I'm here, and I'm glad that everybody else is here. And you know, willingness is really hard for me because I still think things should be the way I want them to be. I still like to go Casey's way. You know, it's cool. It works out pretty well, not so much. Doesn't really work out too well, you know. I think it's gonna work. No, you know, the minute I stick my foot into my own way, my own path, yeah, I'm sunk right there, you know. But I'm glad that I have these spiritual principles that I try to live by. I'm not going to tell you that I do, because I really don't, but I try. You know, like it says in the Just for Today, I will work my program to the best of my ability, and that's what I do on a daily basis. I'm not always willing to go the extra step and to do everything that's suggested me, and I'm not always open-minded when it comes to things, and I'm not always honest. and I'm you know, I'm not always loving, and I'm not always whatever, but I do it to the best of my ability, and that's a more willingness than I've ever had in my entire life. You know, I used for a very long time. I haven't been clean for a very long time, but it's okay today because I have this willingness to do the things that people tell me to do. If you tell me to stand on my head, I may not be able to do it, but I'm willing to try it. You know, if you tell me to run a mile, I probably won't be able to do it, but I'll try. You know, if you're telling me to do something and you've been clean and I see the way you live your life, then I'm going to do it because that's what I was taught to do. When I grew up in A&A and they taught me, you do what you're told to do. And I'm grateful for that because I sure as hell didn't know what to do. I had no clue what I was doing. I couldn't even wash clothes. You know, I had no clue. But willingness is a big part of my life today. It really is, because without being willing to change, to do things that I need to do, I'm going to get nowhere. And I understand that, whether I really do it or not. I understand it, and I guess that's more than, for me, it's okay. It's okay to not always do what I'm told, as long as I'm willing to try. That doesn't really make sense when it comes out of my mouth, but I understand what I'm trying to say. I don't really make sense sometimes. It's all jumbled. But, I don't know. Thanks for listening. I'm a little nervous. I'm shaking, so I'm going to stop talking now, because you guys are all strangers and you're looking at me, and that's weird. It is. It's weird. Like, I can do it when I know people, but I don't know you guys, so it's weird. But thanks for listening. Thanks, guys.
Hey, I'm Sue. I'm an addict. Hey, Sue. And I'm from Metro Detroit, and I'm happy to say that we have 450 meetings a week in Metro Detroit. I always say that. I'm proud. You know, we have a lot of meetings there. And I like this topic. You know, willingness, willing. You know, I thought about when I was sitting there, and I thought, if you want what we have to offer, and are willing to take the steps that are, if you want what we have to offer and are willing to go to any lengths, then you are ready to take certain steps. And I think about, I thought about, maybe I had a little bit of an open mind when I was new, and I was introduced to recovery, and I had a little bit of an open mind to give it a try, because I really didn't want to stay clean in the beginning. You know, I really didn't think this was going to be a forever thing or a lifelong journey for me. And I think along with the open mind, I had a little bit of willingness to give it a try. And it was the people in the program that made it attractive to me. Because there's a lot of things, like, I'm lazy by nature. I don't want to do a lot of work. You know, like, my first sponsor basically said, I'm going to be your sponsor, you know, and because I kind of dilly-dallied around meetings and stuff. And so she and I were having coffee, and she just said, you know, I'm going to be your sponsor. And I'm like, you know, okay. And then she, you know, we went through the steps and, you know, inventoried and stuff like that. And I guess, you know, she was my sponsor for a few years, and I got another sponsor, and we worked the steps. And I think that recovery is a complete alteration of my lifestyle that I knew for a long time. And that old lifestyle was laziness and sloth, and I really didn't want to do much work. I didn't want to work on myself. I knew I didn't like myself, but I really wasn't willing to work on myself. And recovery, like, took me out of that. You know, it took me out of that, and I had a willingness to learn a different way. And it took me out of that old negative thinking lifestyle that I lived in for so long, that prison that I lived in. And I have found now that the longer I'm clean, and I celebrated 22 years back in October, that, thank you. The longer I'm clean, the more willing I'm becoming to do stuff, you know, and I think part of it is setting an example. Now, I'm not standing here thinking, you know, I'm the pillar of recovery and I'm the role model. I am the model of recovery, because I'm not. But when I'm at my normal Friday night meeting and there's 150 people there, and they say we need 3 volunteers to clean up after the meeting, and no one's raising their fucking hands, you know, I got a problem with that, you know. And so I, with my fucking 22 years, am raising my hand, because I'm doing it because I care about the meeting and I care about cleaning up and I care about that stuff, and I can clean up after myself today, but I want to set an example for the newer members or for the unwilling or the lazy members to maybe, hey, if she, because I don't, just because I got the time doesn't mean I don't have to do the work, I don't have to clean up someone else's coffee cup. And so that's, I guess that's what I really wanted to say is it doesn't matter the time, that I still, I find that I put more work into my daily active recovery than I did in my first, 5 years, because I want to keep this. I want to keep it. I want to keep it going strong. I love my life today. I love myself today. I'm happy to be here. I'm as excited to be here as Matt is, with his 4 days. You know what I mean? Like, I want to keep that shit going, And so how do I do that? It's not a spectator thing. It's not like, oh, okay, yeah, if you want what we have, and are willing, to make the effort. So I'm doing this. And this is not a comfort zone for me up here at all. Like, I usually don't volunteer for this shit. If somebody asks me to do an open talk, I do an open talk. I never turn that down, but I usually am not like, pick me, So, but I'm willing, because I don't know if I'll go to another workshop today, to tell you the truth, but I may. But I don't know. I guess I'm done. So thanks for letting me share.
All right, my name's Aaron. I'm an addict. And I just know that like 27 days ago, right, I was willing to hit shots that I thought might take my life. And man, it was one of the hardest things I ever did to will myself to get involved in a program that would save my life. It took me days to finally get to there. And man, they talk about willingness a lot and all these steps. And I was previously in a program, and I had an understanding of the steps, and the principles behind it all. But back then, I never really cared about it. And just in the last month, since I've had the willingness to actually work at these steps and to get a better understanding, it's just great, And I kind of wanted to get up here and just say something, anything. And I figure, hell, I might as well show some willingness and step up here in front of a bunch of people I don't know, and it's just great to be here at a convention. This is my first convention. Welcome, man. And it's just great to just have the willpower to keep with it one day at a time. And with that, I'll go.
Okay, we have come to the end of our meeting. I want to say thanks to all of those that read, that came up here and shared. Thank you. And we'll end with a group hug and a serenity prayer.